Hi, I'm Lily Donovan, and this is my story or whatever. My family's been a bit of a mess since forever. Got a sister, Ellie, who's sort of like the crown jewel at home because of her bad heart. Our mom, yeah, she's fixated on Ellie. With Ellie being born sickly, she got extra eyes on her, extra care. Mom was always shadowing her, making sure she was breathing okay, eating right, or was warm enough. Almost like I'm part of the furniture. Anyway, Dad was different. He was my champ. When I needed something, he was my go-to. He'd listen, not just nod along, but actually listen. Ellie, though, she got all the attention without even trying, and the drama, tons of it. Take one morning at the breakfast table for example. I was on my second cup of coffee, flipping through some job listings. Dad was at the other end, eyeing the sports section like it had the meaning of life tucked in there. Then in breezes Ellie, all theatrics, like she's about to drop some Shakespearean tragedy on us. So, the doc says my heart's acting up again, Ellie says, all breathless and expecting a scene. Mom's up from her seat like someone lit a fire under her, asking, "What does that mean, hon? You feeling okay? You need anything?" Ellie, "Nah, I'm fine. But the vacation's off. Doctor's orders." Dad stops looking at his paper and goes, "That's rough, kiddo." Me, I'm just silent. Because what's there to say? Every little thing about Ellie's sickness tosses our family into chaos. But before I can even shrug, Mom's looking at me with those eyes. You know the type, like I've suddenly kicked a puppy by being quiet. And out of nowhere, I decide to toss in my 2 cents, maybe it's not the end of the world, right? Mom almost jumps at me. "Lily, can't you see your sister's struggling?" Ellie just slurps her juice, watching the show. I shrug. Just saying. There's worse stuff out there, ain't there? Ellie puts her glass down and says, "Nice, sis. Real supportive." Dad finally puts down the paper like he's about to referee a boxing match. "Ease up on your sister, Ellie." But Mom ain't having it, she can at least act like she cares. I push back from the table, this is the same old song and dance. I tell them straight, "Look, Ellie plays sick and we all gotta dance. I'm sick of it." Literally. Ellie's eyes go all wide like she can't believe I'd say that, but come on, it's been the story of my life. Dad gets that I'm fed up, and tries to smooth things over. Let's all just calm down. But I've already grabbed my jacket. Walking out, I toss over my shoulder, "I'll be back when the drama's done." You can bet they had a lot to say after I left, but honestly, for once, it was nice not to hear it. Dad understood, Mom was pissed, and Ellie, well, Ellie was Ellie. That's family for you. My sights were set on college, it was my out. It wasn't just about getting away, it was about getting somewhere. Grades had been my weapon of choice, and I wielded them well. I scored a ticket to a good school, a scholarship to boot. Ellie, despite everything, made it to college too, though it was clear her path there was marked by a different set of expectations. She was out to prove something, but I still wasn't quite sure what. "You gotta aim high, Lil," Dad said once as we cleared plates, his hand landing heavy and sure on my shoulder. "Don't let anyone dim your lights, hear me?" "Yeah, Dad. I hear ya." I smiled, tucking those words close. It was the quiet fuel I needed. To soar. To escape. To be more than just Lily Donovan, sister to the kid with the weak heart, daughter to a mother with uneven scales. College was a different world. I had my nose in the books, pushing hard to make something of myself. Ellie, she just couldn't hack it. She was lost, floundering in seminars and lectures, like she was trying to read a map with no legend. She dropped the news on me like a bomb, the tinny voice from my cell speaker signaling surrender. "College ain't my jam, Lily," Ellie said, her words lackluster. "I'm dropping out." I balanced the phone between my ear and shoulder, multitasking between the call and my constitutional law textbook. "You're bailing?" just like that? Got better things lined up than being a brain like you, she snapped back. There was a heavy dose of her trademark venom in her voice. The same one that could turn from sweetie to serpent in a single sentence. So, what? You're skipping off into the sunset with the first guy who bats an eye? I snorted. Exactly, she hissed. Someone's gotta live a little while you bury yourself in those dusty books. Wouldn't want to die alone with cats as my only company. I squeezed the bridge of my nose. Ellie could never resist a jab. Next thing I knew, I was sitting in the back of a dimly lit church, law book hidden in my lap, as Ellie strutted down the aisle. She had nabbed herself a husband before she'd even figured out who she was. It was like she was playing life's game without bothering to learn the rules. After the I do's, she swanned over with her glass raised, smirking like she'd won some sort of race. Cheers to me, the married woman, and to you, Lily, maybe you'll graduate to cat lady soon? She snickered, cruelty wrapped in a toast. I bit back the anger, knowing Ellie relished any sign of getting under my skin. Maybe, but at least I'll have a law degree to hang on the wall. Cats or not. Her eyes narrowed. You think you're better than me, with your big dreams of being a hotshot lawyer? As she flittered away to go cut the cake, a part of me wanted to scream. I wanted to shake some sense into her. But I stayed in my seat, the anger simmering. Back on campus, I poured myself more into my studies. The late nights were my fortress from Ellie's barbed comments. Every essay, every exam was another brick in my walls, fortifying my future against her cynicism. Ellie and I were on divergent paths, she, reveling in the now with a sharp tongue, and I, building a foundation for tomorrow with gritted teeth. That was just the way of it. You can't pick your family. But you sure as hell can pick which of their words to listen to. And Ellie's? I was learning to let them go like seeds in the wind, insignificant and unworthy of taking root. Turning 30 hit different. The job at Uncle John's law firm was steady. Every day in court was like a chess game. I'd become good at it, keeping my cool under those fluorescent lights. Mark and I had been an item since who knows when. We figured, why not make it official? So we planned to. Dad's been gone a while now. I don't bring it up much. Stuff happened, he's not here, we move on. That means I've kind of been both the rock and the hard place for myself. When I said to Mom and Ellie, hey, I'm marrying Mark in a bit, they just shrugged. That's nice, Mom said without looking up from her cards. Ellie? She couldn't even pause her TV show. I heard her mumble a congrats, buried under a heap of reality show noise and screams of her children. Where is her husband Dave? He was almost never at home. Living with Uncle John's sometimes biting sense of legal wisdom wasn't much different. I'd tell him about the upcoming wedding and he'd just grunt. You sure about the prenup? Romance isn't exactly our family style. So here I am, 2 weeks out, and it's all about the bare minimum. I want a quiet do. Some folks would take Mom and Sis ignoring the whole deal like a punch. I take it like a typical Tuesday. No help? No problem. It's just Mark and me, and that's plenty. I draft my own contracts by day, iron out merge clauses, and at night, I scroll through potential honeymoon spots on my phone. No fluff, just picking a place to unwind. After the case I just cracked, I need it. Weddings bring out strange in folks, I guess. Mom suddenly caught up with her bridge club, acting like playing cards is her full-time job. I dropped by to give her an update on the no-fuss dress I picked, not that she asked. She barely glances up, don't stress. It'll be fine. Full house. I should have knocked. Cool, Mom, I say, but I'm talking to the wall, because she's dealing cards again. Ellie's the same. She calls, and it's one crisis after another. I can't find a dress, she complains over the phone. Ellie, just wear something from your closet. She huffs like I've suggested hiking the Everest in flip-flops. Fine, she snaps. I go about my days, bits and pieces of the wedding falling together between deposition prep and client consultations. Mark's doing his share, but mostly he's just keeping me sane. Always a joke ready to diffuse my stress like a bomb squad pro. I handle the indifferences from Mom and Ellie the same way I manage everything else, with a little nod and a lot of getting on with it. It's like being in the eye of my own personal hurricane, watching all the whirlwinds, but not really feeling them. I've gotten good at it, too good maybe. In the end, it's simple. I'm not walking down the aisle to make a statement. It isn't a parade or a show. It's just signing papers, making things official, a modest gather-up for a lifetime of more down-to-earth moments with Mark. He's the I do at the end of my very practical, very organized checklist. As for Mom and Ellie, well, they'll show up or they won't. The wedding will happen, and then life will roll on. It always does. I was mid-sentence with a contractor, haggling over the price of folding chairs, when Mom's call threw everything off balance. Her voice, usually as steady as a metronome, was all over the place, like a needle jumping grooves on a record. "Honey, Ellie's been left by her husband, with 2 kids," she said, and I could almost picture her hand fluttering to her chest, the way she does when the latest gossip hits. I was so stunned I almost dropped the phone. "What? You're joking." "No, dear. I wish I were. She's a mess. We're all in shock. It's just, would you consider postponing?" I bristled at the notion, felt that stubborn streak flare up. "Postpone? Mom, I've got a timetable tighter than a drum here. You know that." "But Ellie is going to have to deal with her own mess," I cut in, with an edge that said the discussion was closed. But Mom wasn't done. "She needs us, needs family. Maybe it's not a good time for a wedding?" I scoffed. "And when is it ever a good time, huh? Look, I'm sorry for Ellie, but life doesn't stop. Mine doesn't, at least." I turned to Mark, who had witnessed the tail end of the call, his eyebrows doing a high-wire act. "What now?" he asked, towing the line between concern and asking for the mess report. "Ellie's husband ditched her. Mom wants us to push back the wedding." His eyes widened slightly. "Wow. Are we?" I shook my head. "No way. We've bent over backward for this family enough." He nodded, his hand finding my shoulder, a silent signal of support. "All right. But you okay with that?" I took a deep breath, somewhere between frustration and determination. "Hell yes. It's our turn, Mark. We've done the waiting, the pleasing. Remember?" "I remember," he said, that low voice steady as ever. "It's just family is." I raised a hand. "Don't say complicated. It's overrated." Mark chuckled, a low rumble in his chest. "All right, tough cookie. You call the shots." A mix of guilt and relief swirled in me, but I pushed it down. I had enough on my plate without adding second helpings of pity for Ellie. Life ensued. I went back to ticking off checkboxes, ignoring the clawing feeling that comes with not being the good guy. Or in this case, the good sister. The day didn't start off great, and I could tell it was only destined to nosedive from there. Mark was trying to steer clear of any drama, but somehow, we wound up accepting the dinner invite at Mom's place. "Just a family get-together," she'd said. But I knew better. As soon as we walked in, the air was heavy, kinda like walking into a wall. Mom had this stern look plastered on her face, and Ellie, my sister, she was already a few glasses in, eyes red and puffy like she's been crying or something. I barely got my coat off, before Ellie slurred out, "Lily, you gotta understand." Her voice wobbled like one of those wacky inflatable arm guys outside a car dealership. "I'm going through hell, and there you are parading your happiness around." She clutched at her heart out of habit. "But we all know that she is absolutely healthy now, her childhood illness has sunk into oblivion." Stiffening up, I shot back, "Ellie, it's not like that, and you know it. Stop playing the victim." Mark put a hand on my shoulder, urging me to ease up, but I was past fed up. Mom chimed in then, voice cold as ice. Lily, we're just asking for a little compassion. Is that too much? I could feel the temperature drop with her every word. Still, Mark and I, we were a united front. We've planned this for a year, Mark said, his firmness a surprise even to me. It's not just Lily's call, it's mine too, and we're not postponing. Mom gave us a hard look, her lips pressed into a thin line. Ungrateful, she hissed at me. After all we've done for you. I snorted, narrowed my eyes. Ungrateful? Really? For what, exactly? That's when Mom dropped the real bomb, her voice a mix of fury and something that sounded like a twisted form of caring. If you can't cancel your wedding, then at least skip your honeymoon. Stay and watch your nieces and nephews. Give your sister a break to travel, let her heal. Mark snorted, disbelief coloring his chuckle. Are you serious right now? We're supposed to give up our honeymoon for Ellie's getaway? Ellie stood up, swaying a little as she leaned across the table with a sneer. Yeah, 'cause why should you be happy if I'm not? I stood up too, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. Enough, Ellie. Life doesn't stop for you. I'm getting married, and I'm going on my honeymoon. End of discussion. Mom stared at us, eyes flinty. If you walk out that door, Lily, don't bother coming back. And if I stay, what? I get guilt-tripped and walked over my entire life? I snapped, already heading for the door. Mark was right behind me. Neither of us looked back, even as the door slammed shut with a sound that said more clearly than any words could, the line was drawn. It was us against them, and I was done playing by their crazy rules. I was knee-deep in Tool and Good Wishes when Uncle John's number lit up my phone. Ain't this the time when you're supposed to be getting pampered or something? Was his gruff opener when I answered. Yeah, well, you know how it goes. I replied, half laughing, despite the frustrations nipping at my heels. You got a minute? He asked. His voice had that no-nonsense edge to it that I remembered from when I was a kid. Sure, lay it on me, I said, stepping out onto the venue's balcony for some privacy. It's about your mom's latest request, Uncle John started, and I braced myself. Listen, kiddo, she tried to strong-arm me to cancel your vacation. No vacation, no honeymoon, says it's what family does, supports each other and all that jazz. I felt my hands clench around the phone. Is that right? I managed to say, trying to keep the ice out of my voice. Yeah, but don't worry, I told her where to shove it, Uncle John replied, and I could almost hear him spitting the words out. Uncle Jay, you didn't have to get involved, I said, the gratitude and stress mixing up inside me. I'll fight your corner any day. This is your time. You and Mark deserve to enjoy all of it, without any crap thrown your way. I just can't believe she's trying to ruin my wedding and break my honeymoon, I said, rubbing my temple. Stubborn as a mule, that sister of mine, he chuckled, but it was that kind of laugh that didn't reach the eyes. Anyway, I've got your back. You two just focus on tying the knot and then getting naughty on your own time, if you catch my drift. I laughed, a real laugh this time, couldn't have said it better myself, Uncle. Course you couldn't. I'm the family wordsmith, he said, his voice proud as a peacock. Then he lowered it a notch. Remember, kiddo, you're doing nothing wrong. Go, get married, be happy. I promised I would and hung up, feeling a notch lighter, but with the weight of the whole situation still sitting on my chest like an unwelcome cat. The rehearsal dinner was buzzing when I got back. Mark caught my eye across the room and frowned when he saw my face. Everything okay? He mouthed. I nodded and made my way through a sea of relatives and friends, plastering on a smile like it was lipstick. Mark met me halfway, his hands finding mine, his eyes searching my face. You're worrying me, he said. It was Uncle John. Mom's trying to recruit him into her save the date but screw the honeymoon campaign. I sighed, feeling the whole thing splayed out again. He snorted. She's relentless. Like a dog with a bone, I agreed. But Uncle John's not biting. I swear, he's the only one actually standing up for us. Well, we've got each other. That's the main thing, Mark replied, and wrapped me in a hug that felt like armor against the world's crazy. The murmur of family and friends bubbled around us, all unsuspecting of the undercurrents they were swimming in. The table settings gleamed, glasses clinked, and laughter soared like fireflies in the evening light. As I lay down that night, with the stars wearing their best shine outside my window, I could only hope that our next chapter would be written on the bright side of this often too shadowed world. Mark's steady breathing in the dark was a promise and question all at once. It didn't matter what came next. His yes matched my yes, and that felt like the only answer we'd ever need. After what they tried to pull off, Mom and my sister said they wouldn't be caught dead at my wedding. They made sure everyone knew it too, telling anyone who'd listen that I was just a cold piece of work. They didn't stop there, though. They started spreading all sorts of nonsense around town about me, but you know what? It didn't matter one bit. The big day came, and it was nothing short of awesome. Our family and friends filled the place up. There were so many of them. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone was there, laughing and joking around. It was loud, and it was fun, and nobody brought up Mom and Sis. It was like we all agreed not to let them ruin the vibe. My bridesmaids were a whirlwind of activity. Girl, are those butterflies in your stomach? Or just the 2 bottles of champagne we guzzled? Lisa, always the joker, nudged me with her elbow as she adjusted my veil for the 100th time. Just excitement, I guess, I replied, my smile as wide as the horizon. Well, you look banging, Jen chimed in, her hands making tiny adjustments to my bouquet. Mark's gonna fall over when he sees you. The ceremony space was filled with the tunes of a string quartet digging into my favorite classics, nothing fancy, just raw music that filled the soul. Damn, can you believe you're about to get hitched? Lisa sighed, her tough tone softened a touch by the moment. Believe it? I planned it, down to the last petal. I laughed as I peeked through the crack of the door at the guests filtering in. The ceremony was a blur of words and emotions. When it came time to exchange vows, Mark's voice filled the room. I promised to keep it real, to be your partner in crime, to have your back, and make you laugh when life sucks. I took a deep breath, my hands shaking just a little. I promised to always be honest, to support your crazy schemes, to love you even when you leave your socks on the floor. The room erupted into laughter and cheers, the love tangible in the air like the warmth of the spring sun coming through the windows. As husband and wife, you may now kiss the bride, the officiant announced, and Mark wasted no time. It was the kind of kiss that said we were in this for the long haul, for better, for worse, and hell, even for the mundane. Later, as the party wound down, Uncle John found me, his face a little shiny from the festivities. You did good, kid. And if anyone gives you trouble, you send them my way. I will, Uncle Jay, thanks for everything, I said, meaning every word. As the night drew to a close, and the last stragglers left, Mark and I stood hand in hand, taking in the moment. Ready to start this adventure? He asked, squeezing my hand. I've never been more ready for anything in my life, I replied, and we stepped out into the cool night air. We climbed into the car, cans clattering behind us, a playful, just married sign taped to the back. I looked over at Mark, his face illuminated by the streetlights as we drove away. This is it, he said, his hand finding mine. This is us, I said, feeling the truth of it settle in my bones. My new hubby and I took off to this cozy beach spot for our honeymoon. Just us, the sun, and the sea. It was like a week-long chill pill. And nope, I did not call Mom or Sis. Not once. And I didn't miss them either. Yeah, family's supposed to be your rock, right? But sometimes, you gotta build your own foundation. That's what I did, and it's solid. I don't need that kind of crazy in my life, and I'm not about to invite it back in.
You call that a real job? Vivian's shrill voice cut through the tense silence at the dinner table like a knife. I flinched, my fork clattering against the plate. My mother-in-law's beady eyes bored into me, her thin lips curled in disdain. Wasting your days playing around with colors and shapes on a computer. How avant-garde. Across the table, Eli kept his head down, avoiding my pleading gaze. I opened my mouth to respond, but Vivian barreled on, her voice dripping with contempt. I don't know why I even let you stay under my roof. At least Eli made an honest living with his finance job before. She trailed off, though the implication hung heavy in the air. Ever since Eli's unexpected layoff and our move into her home, Vivian had wasted no opportunity to demean my career as a freelance graphic designer. "Mom, that's enough," Eli muttered, but lacked the conviction to meet her glare. Hot shame burned my cheeks as unwanted memories resurfaced. The endless job searches culminating in rejections for roles I was overqualified for. The forced smiles as I explained my unconventional career to friends and relatives, their skepticism thinly veiled. But this was a new low, having my passion, my art, denigrated as a silly indulgence within my own home, by my own family. I swallowed hard, my appetite extinguished. I may not bring in the income your precious Eli once did, but my work is still valid. I take pride in it. Vivian barked a humorless laugh. Pride? In scribbling doodles like a child? Her scornful gaze raked over me, cold with dismissal. I expected better for my son's wife. You're nothing but a disappointment, just like... The shrill ring of the kitchen timer mercifully cut her off. Vivian pushed back her chair with a huff. Well, I'd better check on those pies. We certainly can't have those getting overcooked, unlike some people's ambitions in this house. As she bustled away, an uneasy silence fell over the dining room. I caught Eli's eye, desperate for solidarity, for defense against his mother's relentless belittling. But he just gave a small shrug and dropped his gaze, polishing off his plate. The message was clear. He wouldn't risk crossing Vivian, not while we relied on her hospitality. Clenching my fists until my nails dug crescents into my palms, I fought the hot sting of tears. Our situation was temporary, a difficult but necessary path to get back on our feet after Eli's job loss. At least that's what I'd told myself when we accepted Vivian's offer to move in. How long could we endure her toxic presence? I wondered, my dream career already withering under her disdain. As Vivian's barbed laughter echoed from the kitchen, a leaden knot formed in my chest. This was no home, it was a battlefield, and I was shaping up to be the first casualty. The following week, a new domestic routine took hold that made Vivian's true intentions abundantly clear. "You'd better get started on those dishes, dear," she said in a sugary sweet tone after clearing the breakfast plates. "And don't forget to wipe down the counters. We don't want any unsightly stains." I frowned at the rapidly growing pile in the sink, but dutifully began scrubbing away the remnants of Eli and Vivian's hearty country breakfast. Eggs, bacon, the works. My own meal had been a simple bowl of oatmeal, per Vivian's instructions. "Can't have you packing on any unnecessary pounds," she had tittered, patting my arm in mock concern. "Wouldn't want my Eli to regret his choice in wives now, would we?" By the time I drained the sink, Vivian had already vanished to run her other endless errands and chores, leaving me alone to clean the kitchen to her exacting standards. The same went for the bathrooms, the laundry, dusting every nook and cranny until the house gleamed. "You should be grateful I'm keeping you busy," she said when I dared to protest the relentless workload one evening, "with your unconventional career situation." Her meaning was clear. By her reckoning, I was little more than a freeloader without my real job to occupy me. The chores were her way of justifying my presence under her roof. Eli did his part, at least, diligently searching and applying for any finance opening that matched his experience. But his disillusionment after being cast aside by his former employer was palpable. When he trudged home night after night, head bowed in defeat from another fruitless round of interviews, it was Vivian who offered comfort and pep talks. Her cloying reassurances that he had simply gotten unlucky slowly dissolved his self-confidence while driving a wedge between us. "Poor Eli," she cooed, while I scrubbed furiously at a stubborn scorch mark on the stove. It must be so humiliating having to rely on his dear old mother while his wife contributes nothing to the household. Gritting my teeth, I refused to meet her sly, taunting gaze. I knew full well what her game was, isolating me, chipping away at my self-worth and marriage until I was made to feel like an utter burden. She had taken full advantage of our circumstances, wielding her temporary generosity like a vice to crack me from her son's life. Once shattered, he would have no choice but to turn fully to her for support and approval. The realization struck like a dousing of ice water. My own mother-in-law, scheming against me with ruthless determination. How many of Eli's past relationships had crumbled under her manipulations? No more, I vowed silently, wringing the tattered dish rag between white-knuckled fists. Vivian wanted a war of attrition? She was going to get one. When Eli trudged in that evening, I met him at the door with a grim smile. "We need to talk, in private." His brow furrowed at my tone, but I was done playing Vivian's gamekeeper's prisoner. If she wanted to fight for her son's soul, I would match her fury with a cunning all my own. No more Mrs. Nice daughter-in-law. Over the next few weeks, Vivian's campaign of emotional sabotage kicked into high gear. Not a day went by without some snide remark or underhanded slight designed to reinforce my worthlessness. "Don't you ever get tired of staring at that computer screen all day, dear?" she sneered while I typed away at a logo commission one afternoon. So cosmically unfulfilling. I grit my teeth, refusing to rise to her bait. The client's deposit money was a lifeline in our strained financial situation, one Vivian constantly held over my head. "I'm just worried for your mental health, cooped up in here with no real purpose," she continued with a derisive cluck. "What kind of life is that for a bright young woman?" Thankfully, Eli was out pounding the pavement at another round of fruitless interviews. I wasn't eager to suffer Vivian's harangues with an audience. However, when a promising graphic design opportunity did arise requiring me to attend meetings, she was lying in wait. "You're not seriously considering leaving the house looking like that?" Vivian's shrill voice lashed out as I hurried down the hall, my nicest blouse and slacks neatly pressed. I pulled up short, fingers tightening around the portfolio case. "Meaning what exactly?" "Well, just look at you." She raked a critical gaze over my appearance. "Wrinkled, frumpy, with coin-sized bags under your eyes from hyperventilating over those silly doodles all night." Scalding humiliation burned my cheeks as her words struck home. Between the endless chores and desperate need to prove myself with design gigs, I admittedly hadn't paid much attention to my appearance beyond basic grooming. Vivian's bony arms crossed over her chest, lips pursed in exaggerated disgust. "Is that really the image you want to present to potential employers, dear? They'll smell your slobbery desperation from a mile away. Do us all a favor and spare yourself the embarrassment." The words sliced like a barbed whip, stealing my breath. I clutched the portfolio tighter, blinking back enraged tears as she savored her dominance. I knew playing into her manipulation was exactly what she wanted. But excavating the tattered remnants of my self-confidence proved futile against her relentless torrent of derision. In the end, I canceled the meeting and all future design inquiries, feigning some invented excuse about needing to prioritize the family. Vivian's shark-like smile that evening said it all. Another tendril of my identity brutally pruned in her crusade of subjugation. I was gradually being hollowed out from the inside, hollowed out from the vibrant, passionate woman Eli had fallen for. He remained oblivious, of course, lost in his own dejected fog of unemployment. The few times I tentatively aired my growing resentment of his mother, he just averted his gaze, murmuring some vague reassurance that she ultimately meant well. On the rare nights we connected intimately, I could sense his arousal waning along with his respect for me. Who was I becoming under Vivian's influence? Just another outmatched foe, cowed and depleted by her twisted convictions until only a shell remained? No, some faint flicker of defiance raged from deep within. I wouldn't go down without a fight. Vivian wanted a monster of her own making. She was about to get one. Jaw set, I holed away on the computer, scouring for any digital fingerprints that could expose Vivian's machinations to Eli and the rest of the family. The first counterattack was coming. If she thought she could grind my spirit into submission, she had drastically underestimated my resolve. It was time to go nuclear on the battlefield she created. No more games. No more hollow smiles, masking seething hatred. All-out martial war was about to commence under her very roof. For weeks, I scoured every corner of the house and internet for clues about Vivian's motivations, burning the midnight oil on the computer long after she'd gone to bed. I cross-referenced public records, newspaper archives, social media profiles, anything that could expose her twisted agenda. Finally, the pieces began to fall into place. Pages of printed evidence stared back at me, damning in its comprehensiveness. "Everything okay, dear?" Vivian's sugary voice sliced through my concentration. I quickly minimized the browser window as she poked her head into the cramped home office. "You've seemed so preoccupied lately." "Just working," I mumbled, avoiding her prying gaze. "Keeping myself busy with some design projects." "How industrious." Her bony fingers stroked my shoulder, feigning motherly concern. "But you know, obsessing over those little drawings won't undo the past." I tensed at her words, wondering if she was baiting me. "Like Eli's failed relationships before you." There it was, the barb I'd been anticipating, laced with carefully calculated venom. I slowly pivoted to face her. "What are you suggesting?" Vivian's cold eyes glinted with cruel amusement. "Come now, you're not that dull. Even you must have noticed the pattern emerging." She squeaked loudly, shaking her head in feigned disappointment. "A spate of bright young women in Eli's life, full of promise and prospects. Until gradually, they start drifting away, becoming unmotivated, unambitious, resentful even." My blood turned to ice as she laid out the sickening implications. "Those poor girls simply didn't have the mental fortitude to be part of our family, to take on the duties required of an Elliot matriarch. They broke under the strain, or was it something else that broke them?" Reflexively, I curled my hands into fists to mask their trembling. "If you're insinuating what I think you are, I'm simply connecting the dots, dear." Vivian clucked her tongue again, as if chastising a petulant child. "Face facts, you're following the same inescapable trajectory as the others. Your professional situation is merely a precipitating factor, not the root cause." Her skeletal finger wagged in my face as she savored dragging out the reveal. "I did what I had to in order to preserve my son's future prospects, to protect him from diminishing attachments that would only wither his potential." The words spilled out in a sickening rush, past relationships poisoned through steady emotional attrition. Financial entrapment, isolation, relentless needling until the woman's self-worth splintered. All orchestrated by Vivian in a coldly premeditated campaign of subjugation. You monster!" I choked out, struggling not to retch. "How could you do that to Eli, to your own son?" "I did it for Eli," she snapped, that familiar flash of contempt hardening her features. "To spare him the heartbreak of making the wrong choice and resigning himself to mediocrity. A mother's love can be cruel at times, but at least I had his best interests at heart." Her serpentine tongue flicked out to moisten her pursed lips. "This time will be no different, I'm afraid. For his own good, you simply have to go." With a final vindicated smirk, Vivian slithered from the room, leaving me to absorb the full, monstrous truth alone. Gripping the computer desk to steady my shaking limbs, I could no longer deny the depravity unfolding in slow motion around me. My mother-in-law wasn't just a manipulative harpy. She was a calculated, silver-tongued sociopath, systematically undermining my identity to its very core. All in the name of keeping her claws firmly latched into Eli's soul, molding his destiny to fit her twisted, narrow convictions. Anyone who threatened that control was simply another target to be crushed and discarded. White-hot rage seared through my shock, tempering into grim determination. If Vivian thought she could cow me into submission like her past victims, she had sorely underestimated this particular adversary. With a trembling hand, I reopened the research files, pages of tawdry deceptions meticulously logged, her own smug digital fingerprints preserved in sickening detail. I wouldn't just confront this sadistic harridan. I would dismantle her respectable facade, blow by agonizing blow until nothing remained but the gnarled, bitter husk she truly was. The game was on. This time, Vivian was going to learn just what kind of monster she'd created. After Vivian's chilling confession, I knew I had to act fast before her toxic influence metastasized any further. Gathering up the incriminating evidence I'd compiled, I made a silent vow. One way or another, this torment would soon be over. The first step was recruiting an ally on the inside. While Eli remained disturbingly blind to his mother's machinations, his father Nathan had increasingly picked up on the strain she was inflicting. One evening, after another tension-filled family dinner, I caught him alone in the den while Vivian was preoccupied with dishes. "We need to talk," I murmured under my breath, gesturing for him to follow me into the hallway. Nathan's brow furrowed with concern, but he complied without a word. "I can't take much more of this," I confessed in a hoarse whisper once we were out of earshot. Vivian's muffled humming from the kitchen made the hair prickle on my neck. "You know what she's been doing to me, don't you?" Nathan's haggard expression made it clear the truth wasn't lost on him. With a reluctant sigh, he gave a solemn nod. "You're not the first to suffer her special attention. It's a miracle Eli and I have stayed sane all these years." My hands trembled as I clutched the file, forcing the words out in a ragged rush. "It's even worse than we thought. She confessed to sabotaging Eli's previous relationships on purpose. Everyone who got close to him, she was systematically destroying them out of some sick, twisted obligation." A muscle twitched in Nathan's weathered jaw as he absorbed my words. For a long moment, he could only stare at me in stunned silence. "I had my suspicions," he finally rasped, scrubbing a hand over his face. "But to have it confirmed like this—" He shook his head in a slow, mournful arc before squaring his shoulders with newfound resolution. "No more. This has gone on for far too long." Reaching out to grasp my arm, Nathan gave it a reassuring squeeze, his eyes boring into mine with surprising urgency. "You get yourself out of here, you hear? Get somewhere safe while I figure out how to deal with the old bat for good." "But Eli—" I started to protest. "Leave my son to me." He cut me off with gruff insistence. "He's been too deep in her trance for too damn long. I'll make him understand what kind of vile creature he's been defending." A tense silence stretched between us, punctuated by the faint clink of dishware from the kitchen. "Be ready to expose all this at the next family gathering," Nathan continued in a low rasp. "Air out all her skeletons for everyone to see. It's long past time they knew the truth about their matriarch." I could only nod, a surge of gratitude temporarily rendering me speechless. At last, I had an ally willing to stand up to Vivian's tyranny. For now, start making your escape plans. Get yourself sorted with a safe place to land. His brow furrowed as a new thought occurred to him. "And whatever you do, don't tip off that you're onto her schemes. The less she suspects, the better our advantage." My heart hammered as the magnitude of the situation crystallized. This was it. The endgame against Vivian's poisonous influence was finally being set into motion. Tucking the file securely under my arm, I gave a determined nod. "Consider it done. No more skulking in the shadows, letting that wretched succubus grind me down piece by piece." A flicker of approval ghosted across Nathan's stern features. "Attaway, remember, whatever bridges you have to burn on your way out, it'll be worth it. Just watch your back until it's time to strike." With a final grim nod of understanding, we separated, the first shots having been fired in the looming confrontation to dismantle Vivian's toxic dynasty once and for all. Steeling my nerves, I turned towards plotting out the footwork for my escape. The old crone wanted an adversary worthy of her cruelty. She was about to get her deepest, darkest wish. The next few weeks were an agonizing exercise in subterfuge as Nathan and I laid the groundwork for our offensive against Vivian, keeping my hatred simmering under icy control while she continued her insidious manipulations was a Herculean effort. "Dear, you're looking peaky," Vivian crooned with mock concern one afternoon, eyeing my taut expression over her teacup. "I do hope you're not letting stress over your career troubles get the better of you." My fingernails dug into my palms as I fought back the torrent of vile retorts. So smug, so utterly self-assured that her twisted convictions granted carte blanche to emotionally eviscerate anyone who crossed her path. Mercifully, the weekend of the biannual Elliott family reunion finally arrived, providing the perfect stage to execute our long-awaited strike. While Vivian preened about playing the dutiful hostess, I quietly assembled the comprehensive evidence files Nathan and I had compiled. "Everything's in place," Nathan murmured under his breath as we made final preparations. Dozens of relatives began filtering into the spacious backyard, drawn by Vivian's empty promises of bonhomie. "You sure you're ready to go through with this?" I inhaled deeply, fueling my nerves against the coming onslaught. "More than ready," It's long past time that wretched phony was unmasked for everybody to see. No more games, no more hollow facades of civility. This was about to get brutally, ruinously real. As the afternoon dragged on, I maintained a calculated poker face, watching Vivian flit from group to group with her signature plastic smile. The utter audacity of her public performance after admitting her monstrousness made my skin crawl. If I could have everyone's attention, she finally called out in a saccharine lilt, waving a simpering hand for silence. I just wanted to take a moment to welcome you all, the Elliott family homestead, and... The droning of her false platitudes tuned out as I caught Nathan's terse nod beside me. Showtime. Striding forward with the file cradled against my chest, I shoved my way into the center of the patio, fixing Vivian with a look of undisguised revulsion. A startled hush washed over the gathering as all eyes turned toward us. "That's enough of your grotesque pantomime, you wretched soulless harpy," I spat, every pent-up syllable simmering with palpable venom. "We're all quite familiar with what a despicable, manipulative monster you truly are." Vivian's staged smile curdled into a look of apoplectic rage. "How dare you?" "No, how dare you?" I shot back, unshakably coldly. "How dare you present this facade of genteel hospitality after all the lives you've mercilessly worked to unravel over the years?" With a deft hand, I cracked open the file and began coldly reciting the highlights from Vivian's documented trail of cruelty. The financial constraints, the cruel taunts, the systematic dismantling of her victim's sense of self-worth. A chorus of horrified gasps and muttering echoed around the patio as one ugly truth after another poured out. "You did this to me," I declared, glaring at her with undisguised loathing. "You did this to all those girls unlucky enough to catch your precious Eli's heart before me. Anything at all, to keep your son under your dominion like some sort of deranged, emotional succubus." The word hung heavy over the patio, weighted with grotesque implication. Vivian, to her credit, had descended into sputtering, incoherent rage. "Monstrous lies," she finally shrieked, stabbing a clawed finger in my direction. "Everything I've done has been to preserve the integrity of this family, to keep us from being polluted by grasping, unworthy leeches like this spiteful harridan." I leveled an icy glare, feeding off the horrified energy rippling through the gathered Elliots. "You can drop the martyr act now, Vivian. We have testament after testament thoroughly documenting your toxic, sociopathic crusade to undermine anyone foolish enough to love your son." I let the damning file drop at her feet in revulsion. "You're an emotional terrorist, plain and simple, and you've been exposed to everyone here for the festering, irredeemable cancer you are." Vivian visibly wilted under the weight of silent condemnation from the surrounding family. One by one, the circle tightened around her, driving the twisted matriarch into a corner like the rabid animal she was. "Get out!" A gruff, furious voice cut through the tension. Nathan, finally free from her web, stalked forward with unvarnished loathing twisting his features. "Get out of my house, you miserable succubus. Your reign of terror is over." In that moment, the indomitable Vivian Elliott shriveled into a pitiable, broken creature. The rank stench of her malignance finally laid bare for all to behold. Satisfaction sang through my veins as I turned to watch her slinking, shunned and disgraced out into the lonely night. My own personal demon had finally been exorcised, and the future, while still shrouded in lingering hurt, finally shone with a glimmer of hope for redemption at last. The days following Vivian's brutal exposure at the family reunion were a maelstrom of turmoil. The Elliott clan, so accustomed to putting on airs of unity and decorum, had been irrevocably fractured by the truth about their matriarch's depravity. Entire branches of the family tree followed Vivian into exile, stubbornly clinging to her perfidious lies out of misplaced loyalty or sheer inability to accept her monstrous actions. Sister turned against brother, cousin against cousin, as age-old allegiances combusted into acrimonious infighting. Through it all, a hollow-eyed Eli could only watch in numb disbelief as the bedrock of his existence crumbled to ruin. For so long, he had been under his mother's diabolic spell, his sense of identity and priorities hopelessly warped to serve her pathological needs. I never truly saw her for what she was," he murmured one evening in a voice leached of all emotion. "How could I have been so blind?" We sat together on the back patio steps, the chilly night air lending a funereal pall. I reached over, clasping his hand in silent solidarity. "Your devotion as a son isn't something to censure yourself over," I said softly. "Vivian's skill as a master manipulator is what blinded you to her true nature for so long." Eli dragged in a ragged breath, squeezing his eyes shut as memories undoubtedly flooded back. The endless criticisms, the insidious needling against every relationship, that relentless push to surrender his individuality. "She really did think she was protecting me, didn't she?" he said at last, anguish clouding his features. "In that sick, twisted way of hers, she deluded herself into believing I needed her. Tough love to grow into the man she envisioned." My throat tightened at the naked vulnerability in his voice. For years, Vivian had stripped away his sense of self-worth and autonomy, leaving behind an emotional husk devoid of anything but codependent obedience to her narcissistic whims. "I'm so sorry, Eli," I whispered, feeling the sting of tears, "for not seeing it sooner, for ever letting her get her claws into us like that." His answering look was harrowed but clear. "Don't apologize, not for a second. She's the one who has to live with being a goddamn monster." A terse nod punctuated his words. For the first time I could remember, Eli carried the spark of unflinching resolution in his gaze. The spell was broken, Vivian's influence reduced to so much wasteful toxin being finally purged. Perhaps sensing this pivotal shift, Nathan quietly emerged onto the patio, a haggard older man suddenly freed of decades of emotional shackles. He moved to stand beside us in solemn solidarity. "So it's done then," he murmured in a gravelly tone. "The Dowager demon has been cast into the pit at long last." Eli gave a hollow nod, squeezing my hand tighter as Nathan settled onto the step beside us with bone-weary resignation. "It will take some recalibrating," he continued somberly. "For all of us, but most of all you, son. She didn't just undermine your partners, she systematically stripped you of any sense of self beyond her ambitions. Rebuilding that identity, overcoming those conditioned insecurities, it'll be a daily battle for a while yet." Silence hung heavy between them as the weight of Vivian's psychic toll sank in. So much damage inflicted, so much work ahead to heal the grievous, indelible scars. But her reign of terror was finally, mercifully over. "We'll get through it," I vowed resolutely, clutching Eli's hand with renewed determination. "Both of us, together this time. That cancerous influence is gone for good." A flicker of gratitude warmed Nathan's gruff features as he regarded me. "I have no doubt you will. A burden's been lifted we didn't even realize we were carrying all these years." Rising to his feet with an inscrutable glance towards the house's flickering lights, he cleared his throat. "Whenever you two are ready to start fresh, well, you've got a hell of a lot of personal healing ahead, but at least that path's is clear now." Summoning a rueful chuckle, he briefly rested a hand on Eli's shoulder as he moved to retreat back inside. "Take all the time you need, son. That twisted karma has finally unwound. Now it's just a matter of finding which path leads away from its ruins." The night breeze whispered across the yard, carrying whispers of possibility for the reclaimed future suddenly laid bare before us. For the first time in a long while, I allowed myself a tentative breath of hope. Vivian was gone, exorcised. Now the true revival could finally begin. The months following our escape from Vivian's toxic web were an arduous journey of healing and rediscovery. Eli, in particular, fought to remake his sense of identity, to untangle decades of conditioning that had molded him into a hopelessly codependent extension of his mother's malignant narcissism. There were setbacks, of course, nights when the old insecurities would flare up, driving him into brooding funks until I managed to coax him back from that familiar abyss of self-doubt. Her spectral influence lingered like a cancerous remnant, poisoning his confidence at the most inopportune times. But we persevered, leaning on one another through the darkness. I refused to let Vivian's legacy consume us, no matter how viciously and stubbornly it clung to the roots of our relationship. Soon enough, my own artistic passions reignited in the wake of that toxic drought. Commissions and graphic design gigs steadily poured in, each completed piece chipping away at the rubble that Hag had strewn across my self-worth. "You're really starting to hit your stride," Eli murmured one evening, studying my latest logo mock-up with a contemplative gaze. "This work, it's undeniably brilliant, Marla. No vile opinions can refute that truth anymore. The unveiled sincerity in his voice washed over me like a soothing balm for the old, barely healed wounds. Gone was the meek, beaten-down husk of a man who had meekly abdicated his identity to Vivian's depraved whims. This Eli was revitalized, newly confident in voicing his convictions, without the looming fear of displeasing his manipulative parent. Free to be his own person at long last. Even Nathan, cordoned off in his separate home across town, exhibited remarkable strides in shaking off Vivian's corrosive influence. Some evenings he would stop by unannounced, hell-bent on reconnecting through the simple joys of family he had been deprived of for decades. "So this is what an Elliot matriarch should truly be," he rumbled approvingly as I dished up plates of homemade chicken parmesan, his first taste of my cooking in years. One whose passion centers around bringing people together rather than, well, you know. Eli and I exchanged a loaded look, both of us intimately aware of just what kind of matriarch Vivian had been, the kind whose legacy we were both still working to extract from our psyches. "It's a work in progress," I said with a tight smile. "But that's a good problem to have, building something nurturing out of the rubble she left behind." "Amen to that," Nathan replied gruffly, tucking into his meal with gusto. Occasionally he would grunt an appreciative nod between hefty bites, as if committing every tender, zesty forkful to memory. Simple family moments like this were no longer to be taken for granted, not after Vivian had deprived the Elliot clan of genuine intimacy and trust for far too long. Over time, Eli's professional life also righted itself in Vivian's absence. A promising financial advising position opened up, and to my immense pride, he attacked the opportunity with a boldness and dynamism that had been sorely lacking under his mother's oppression. "They'd be damned fools not to scoop you up immediately," I murmured as he prepped for the final round of interviews in his characteristic tailored suit. "Vivian's poison is expunged. Now they'll get to see you exactly for who you are." He grinned, that old self-assured charisma rekindled in his eyes as he reached over to squeeze my hands. "And who, pray tell, is that?" he asked with an arched brow. "A strong, ethical man who won't neglect his convictions or family," I shot back, matching his rakish look. "The kind of person I should have been able to see all those years ago, before that decrepit succubus warped your identity beyond recognition." His grin widened into an expression of unvarnished joy and love, the old scars finally mended enough to let happiness pour forth undeterred. Leaning in, he claimed my lips in a fiery, passionate embrace, one sealed after years of toxicity, despair, and harrowing conflict. We had both been forged anew from the smelter of Vivian's cruelty. Hardened, certainly, but undeterred in our quest to neutralize her lingering influences once and for all. When Eli landed the position a week later, we celebrated with a toast not just to his achievement, but to our collective rise from the ashes of that miserable psychopath's machinations. A new life, a new world of opportunity beckoned, one finally free from the crushing weight of that demented matriarch's control. The morning saga ended with Eli and I arm in arm at one of my own gallery openings nearly a year later, beatifically expectant with our first child as the ultimate repudiation of Vivian's derangement. Around us, a teeming crowd of colleagues, friends, and family congregated to celebrate my ascendant artistic achievements, solemnly reveling in the hard-won victories we had each carved from the rubble of past trauma. In that electrifying moment of validation and renewal, Vivian Elliott's malignancy was finally, conclusively extinguished by the twin fires of perseverance and love. She would always be a part of our shared histories. That much was undeniable. But her defeat and our dogged efforts to emerge unbowed from her cruelty's cauldron ensured that the last echoing remnants of that toxic matriarch's depravity had been forever exorcised. The Elliots' healing could truly begin at last.